Welcome to the Resaca battlefield. I'm Chris Mackowski of Emerging Civil War for the American Battlefield Trust, and we're delighted to have you with us here. I'm with Gary Edelman and Will Greene. We are inside a 4-gun battery in the Confederate line. Hey, if you remember from our previous video, Will was setting up the major fighting that's about to erupt here on this battlefield. Right now, it's been skirmishing back and forth as the armies are getting a feel for each other, trying to understand who's where and what they're going to do. And to talk a little bit about how that action erupts into the real deal fighting that Gary talked about, I want to bring on our friend Will Greene.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, we are in one of the best preserved artillery positions at the whole Resaca battlefield. This was the position defended by Slocum's Louisiana Battery of the Washington Artillery of New Orleans. And if you look at a map, we are in Billy Bates's division line with Thomas Benton Smith's brigade to my right or to the south, and the Orphan Brigade of Kentuckians to my left or to the north, with Slocum's battery sitting up here on the high ground between those infantry supports. Now, in 1864, needless to say, there would not have been woods right in front of us here, although you can see over my shoulders the open ground of the Camp Creek Valley. Now, the Camp Creek Valley is about 400 yards wide. It is shelterless except for the stream bed of Camp Creek, which will provide some desperate protection for the Union attackers here. The day is May 14th, 1864. Now at Resaca, there had been minor skirmishing on the 9th between McPherson and Canty's brigade. There had been more fighting on the 13th as Sherman was probing forward towards the established Confederate line. But May 14th will be the day when the real combat at Resaca begins. Now, what is Sherman's concept here? Is Sherman going to try to attack this strong position and overwhelm it? No, he's going to follow his game plan, which is to launch diversionary attacks just like he had done at Rocky Face Ridge, while in the meantime he is crossing the Oostenaula River via pontoon bridges at Lay's Ferry, about 4 miles downstream from Resaca, put a force on the south side of the river and put Johnston in a position to either fight for his supply line or retreat farther to the south. And now the Confederates have a strong line here, as we mentioned earlier, about 3 3/4 miles long, facing to the west, as Chris's camera is facing, and then a refused flank across what is now Interstate 75, facing to the north here. He's got about 50,000 troops in position. They're dug in behind strong fortifications, with the Federal alignment across from us on the opposite ridge. This is the position of Hardee's Corps for the Confederates, and opposite us, Sherman has McPherson's Army, the 16th Corps, the 15th Corps under Logan. He has the 14th Corps under Palmer. He has Hooker's 20th Corps, and on his left, just about opposite us, or a little bit to the north of us, he has the 2 divisions of the 23rd Corps in Schofield's army. Now, about 11:30 in the morning, Sherman is going to launch these diversionary assaults. He has 4 divisions, 2 in Palmer's, and the 2 divisions in Schofield's army are going to be the troops that are going to make this assault. Now again, they're not supposed to be driving the Confederates away. They're supposed to be pinning them down, keeping their attention here, while the real action item is going to be to the south, where they're crossing the Oostenaula River. He's going to commit those 4 divisions here, and he wants them to be simultaneous. But it's not going to unfold that way. Henry Judah, in command of one of Schofield's divisions, 2 brigades, Nathaniel McLean's and Milo Haskell's brigade, are supposed to coordinate with their buddies in Jacob Dolson Cox's division to attack all at once. But Judah jumps the gun. Cox is not ready to attack, but Judah goes forward instead. And the Federals have a really tough nut to crack here. First of all, they're on a high ridge opposite us, and if you come out to Resaca battlefield, you can walk the trail that will take you to the Union line, and you will see that it is almost a precipitous 100-foot drop from the Union position down to the Camp Creek Valley. So they have to negotiate that. That's going to disorganize any kind of a formation to begin with. Secondly, the Federals really don't have any reconnaissance here. They really don't know what they're up against. They know the Confederates are here, but they don't know exactly where. They don't know what the strength is. They're going into this attack blindly. Thirdly, they've got to cross 400 yards of wide open ground against whatever Confederate resistance is up here. And that resistance is going to occur one of the center points right here where Slocum's artillery is concerned. And one of the privates that was servicing a gun up here with the Washington Artillery, a man named Stevenson, had this to describe as Judah's attack comes off around noontime on May 14th. He says, before and to the right of us, immediately in the path of the advancing columns, lay a beautiful valley of meadowland, about 300 yards in width, actually about 4, dressed in vivid green. It separated the two ridges on which the opposing forces lay. The woods, dense and black, reached to the foot of the valley on the enemy's hill. Their trenches were hidden completely, and even their descent to the valley down the hillside was concealed. But when their solid lines of blue broke suddenly from the woods into view, their banners made gorgeous flame by the flooding sunlight, and sparkles and glitterings flashed forth from their equipment. On they came in 3 solid lines, in splendid order, bayonets glancing, banners waving, strains of music pealing, until half across the valley. Then, as by one impulse, they plunged by the double quick into the charge. At the same instant, our ominous silence is broken. A wild clang of musketry mingles with the thrilling yell of our men, and the loud and rapid roar of the battery bursts forth like a sudden furious storm upon them. The vast host halts, staggers, and 3 lines melt into each other in one confused and reeling mass. Then they roll back in dismay to be swallowed by the woods once more. Then indeed came the yells of our men, the rebel yell, one long, continuous, unbroken peal, untutored and spontaneous. Back would return the hoarse, defiant shout of the beaten but sullen foe. 3 lines in 3 hours was this hazardous and bloody effort made, each time ending in terrible discomfiture. Night alone put an end to their dogged pertinacity, and when she threw her dark pall over the ghostly field, the green little valley resounded with the cries of the wounded and the dying, while the members of the infirmary corps flitted like ghosts here and there, hastily performing their melancholy work. And indeed, as Stevenson describes, the Federal attacks would continue for 3.5 hours here. Palmer then made an attack with Turchin's brigade leading the charge. They made it only as far as the Camp Creek stream bed, and with terrible casualties, they fell into that stream bed to use as a natural trench. Then Cox's division arrived on the scene, and they made their attack with a similar outcome. As the fighting ended before dark, about 3 o'clock, the serious fighting ended, 3.5 hours of combat here. The Federals would count 1,600 casualties, as opposed to a handful of casualties for the Confederates. As a result of this victory here on the north-south alignment at Resaca, Joe Johnston started to feel his oats a little bit, and he thought that maybe the time was right for him to launch an attack. And he gave orders to Hood's Corps. That was the corps that was facing north rather than facing west. And with 2 divisions, Hood's Corps made an attack, overwhelmed one Union division, but then Joe Hooker sent some reinforcements to that position, and by nightfall, Hood's attack had failed. So the fighting on the 14th had ended here indecisively with a serious Federal defeat at the Camp Creek Valley, and a less serious but no less decisive defeat on the Confederate attack on the north side of the battlefield. In the meantime, the pontoon bridges were being built. Sweeney had advanced a few of his forces across to the south side, but one Confederate division was already on the south side, Shot Pouch Walker's division, and Sweeney, being concerned that he might get cut off with a large number of Confederates, actually retreated back across the river. So the 14th was not a great day for William Tecumseh Sherman's army here.
You know, and this sounds like a little bit more than a diversionary attack, to be sure. I mean, this is more costly than some entire battles that are just going on over here. And I guess what I want to say too is, many of you tell us online and when you send us in your donations that, and by all means a great and honorable thing to do, that you're honoring your ancestor who fought in that particular engagement at that place. And for many people in the Civil War, this was not only their most intense experience coming across the Camp Creek Valley, but for one of my colleagues, Matt George, his ancestor would meet his end as part of Judah's preemptive sort of attack across this area. He wanted me to call this out, and that's just one of tens of thousands of stories we hear from you all who had ancestors fighting at some of the places we're looking to preserve. In this case, we've been able to preserve the very land of Judah's attack and whatnot, and luckily George Barnard came and photographically preserved through a handful of photos some of what it looked like. This is the type of valley we're looking at, and actually Chris was already showing, although you can't see it, this eminence in the distance. So we're looking at something not exactly on the same spot, but of the type of thing the troops would have seen. Barnard was here in 1864 and 1866 recording the Atlanta campaign. So we not only have some battlefield to look at here, we have 1,000+ acres at Resaca. You now have hundreds of acres at Rocky Face Ridge. This doesn't sound like a campaign that's been completely obliterated. Rather, you can still understand it through the resources that we have.
One of the things I love about a trip like this are the serendipitous echoes that happen over the course of doing several videos. We're standing at Slocum's Washington Artillery Battery. You might remember Jim Ogden put us among Slocum's cannon when he was talking about Breckinridge's attack at Chickamauga. So we're really standing in the same footsteps of those same men and their same artillery pieces in a different circumstance. One of the things that's hard to appreciate because of the trees behind us, as Will had mentioned. Look back to our last video where we were standing out at the bottom of the valley in the wide open field in the meadow that Will had talked about in the account that he shared. And because it's running right between this ridgeline that we're standing on and the ridgeline that the Federals were on, all the water drains off into those lowlands. And the main course of Camp Creek meanders, hugs the ridgeline in one place. There are water courses that crisscross and cobweb across that field. And so you've got a lot of open space, no cover, and it's swampy, it's wet, it's hard to get across, it's muddy, it's exposed. And so, again, the terrain plays a huge role here, and having the battlefield to be able to walk on and study makes all the difference in being able to understand how that all comes together.
Yes, and speaking of being able to understand and access this ground, let me just say, if this video has inspired you to make a trip to Resaca and you'd like to see where we are and maybe see this part of the battlefield, when you come to the Resaca Battlefield Park, drive to the end of the tour road and follow the blue trail in either direction. If you go to the left, you'll start in the Union line. If you go to the right, you'll come to where we are. It's a loop trail that takes you from each side of the battlefield across Camp Creek and back to the parking area here, and you will see a large number of well-preserved fortifications on both sides and get a real appreciation for the terrain and the combat that occurred here.
And I want to say, too, the park staff has been wonderful to us today. We want to really thank the folks who came out to help open this up for us and make it available to us. We're having a great time. We're glad you're with us, exploring, sharing, discovering, being inspired, as Will talks about. I want to thank Chris White behind the camera for the stunt work he has done, crawling through the leaves and up over into the embattlements here. I want to thank Will Greene. I want to thank Gary Edelman. We've got lots of photos we're going to be sharing throughout this campaign, and you know Gary, he's got to talk about pictures, right? He just finds it so dull and boring. We're going to have lots more to share. I'm Chris Mackowski. Thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for all you do to support battlefield preservation and education.
Hi, I'm Ken Padgett. Honored to be the president of the Friends of Resaca Battlefield. And please come and visit our parks. We have a lot of acreage here preserved for you. So visit us at resacabattlefield.org for more information. That'll also give you email contacts and stuff, and we hope to see you soon.